Okay, give me just a moment. We're going live with a 5-second lag, and I will unmute us.
You tell me when we're live.
We are live and unmuted.
All right. Thank you. This is the Coastal Permit Administrator hearing for April 8th, 2021. Let the record show the time is 11:01 a.m. And so I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. Can we get a determination of noticing?
Everything, the project was noticed right appropriately.
Thank you. All right, so now we're going to move to item 3, which is the regular calendar. What we have is a boundary line adjustment number B 2017-0043. And the owner is WM Partnership LLC and Travis Swithenbank. Applicant is Vance Ricks. The agent is Jim Ronco. The request is a boundary line adjustment to align parcel boundaries with coastal zone boundary and remove split designations. Parcel A, which is assessor's parcel number 069-320-01, would increase from 10.85 to 11.35 acres, and parcel B, which is assessor's parcel number 069-320-02, would decrease from 10.85 to 10.35 acres. The property is located within the coastal zone, approximately 4 miles north of the city of Fort Bragg, and the subject parcels are approximately 700 feet east of the intersection of State Highway 1 and Nameless Lane within the unincorporated area of Mendocino County. The properties are currently addressed as 32,800 and 32,700 Nameless Lane, Fort Bragg. And based on this, the project or the application has been determined to be categorically exempt from CEQA. May I please get a staff report?
Certainly. Mark Kleiser, Planner 2 and Planner for this project, has indicated this project is a coastal boundary line adjustment to align parcel boundaries with the coastal zone and remove split designations. I'd like to take a moment to go over the definition of a boundary line adjustment per Mendocino County Division Land Regulations, and that's defined as the transfer of property by deed to a respective owner or owners of contiguous property for the purpose of adjusting a boundary line and not for the purpose of creating an additional lot or parcel. There is no subdivision or development proposed as part of this project. Any subdivision or development will require additional discretionary permits and will go to a public hearing. The boundary line adjustment will not affect access to either parcel. The project was referred to the Department of Transportation, who responded with no comment. Staff visited the project site on December 4th, 2020 with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife and noted that the eastern portion of Lot B is hydrologically connected to the Inglenook Fen watershed. As such, any future development on Lot B should be conditioned to establish buffer areas around the fen. Can I borrow your... I'd like to point out, can I get that map?
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry.
Where did it go? Oh, right there, sorry.
Okay.
So for the record, staff is sharing their screen as to the map that delineates the proposal.
Yes. So Lot A here, which is primarily located inland, will increase in size from approximately 10.8 acres to approximately 11.3. The increase will occur in the southeast corner of Lot A, which is right here, along Nameless Lane. Due to the zoning and corridor setback requirements, the amount of increased buildable area is minimal. Lot B, which is in the coastal zone, will decrease from approximately 10.8 acres to 10.3 acres. The increase will occur in the northwest corner of Lot B, which will be here. Because of setback requirements to the adjacent parcels, the amount of increased buildable areas in here is also minimal. Getting back to the site visit, CDF noted that the hydrological connection to Inglenook Fen and they are concerned that future development could result in significant impacts. As such, Condition 8 in the staff report has been included for this project, which requires the applicant to place a note on the deed stating that future development may require additional studies and/or may be subject to restrictions, and that future development shall be in conformance with the criteria for development within environmentally sensitive habitat area and visual resource and special treatment areas. California Coastal Commission comments also pointed to the fen on Lot B, and they support CDFW's comments regarding the fen and request notes on the deed to include a minimum setback for future development. They also reiterated that future development on Lot B will require additional analysis of the on-site wetland. As the project is not creating additional lots, it is excluded from the Subdivision Map Act per Section 66412D, which also states that a local agency shall not impose conditions on its approval of a lot line adjustment except to conform to applicable plans. Staff addressed how the project conforms to county plans. Mendocino County Coastal Element Policy 3.1-32 states boundary line adjustments will not be permitted if any parcel created as a result will be entirely within an ESHA, or any parcel being created does not have adequate building site which would allow for development. This project will not create either scenario. The project is not in an area where natural grade exceeds 30%. As such, it is in conformance with Coastal Element Policy 3.87, which addresses sewage disposal systems. The project is not in a highly scenic area or tree removal area per Policy 3.5-3. The project will not result in a change in density as it does not provide for divisions beyond that which currently exist. The project will not result in a parcel having more than one zoning designation and will not create any new parcels. No substandard parcels will result from the adjustment as both parcels are currently above standard in size and consistent with their zoning designations. The project is not located on property containing pygmy vegetation or soils capable of producing pygmy vegetation. And finally, no impacts to any riparian areas will be incurred as a result of this boundary line adjustment, nor will it significantly degrade or destroy the habitat of any endangered plant or animal species. The project is categorically exempt from California Environmental Quality Act per Section 15305, Class 5A, which exempts projects that do not result in any changes in land use or density, including minor lot line adjustments not resulting in the creation of any new parcels. Any future projects on either parcel will need to undergo their own environmental determination. The project is appealable, and staff recommends approval of the project with conditions. Before I conclude my presentation, I would like to address public concerns from both individuals as well as the concerned neighbors of the Cleon community. These concerns are more focused on future subdivision and development and are not part of the boundary line adjustment. However, they will be addressed should the project continue to subdivision and development. Finally, correspondence was received from Colin Morrow. In a letter dated April 6, 2021, Mr. Morrow stated the boundary line adjustment as proposed would impermissibly result in the creation of parcels, that the boundary line adjustment fails to supply required information, that the boundary line adjustment is not exempt from CEQA, and that approval of the project would be contrary to the general plan. Staff reviewed Mr. Morrow's comments and based on them has submitted a memo revising the project findings. And this concludes my presentation. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Okay, with that, I think we can go back to the standard screen. And let's see, at this point, do we have the applicant or their agent online and wish to make any comments?
Yes. Excuse me. We have the applicant and the agent.
Hello, can you hear us?
Yes, can you please identify yourself for the record?
Jim Ronco.
And Vance Ricks.
All right.
And this is Travis Wickenbank.
Oh, thank you. So this is your opportunity to speak on the proposal.
On behalf, I think, of the applicant, agent, and owner, we thoroughly agree with and compliment staff on the report and the findings. And look forward to the coastal administrator making a favorable finding and favorable conditions of approval.
All right. Any other comments?
I have none.
All right. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing. And if I could get anybody that's speaking on this matter to identify themselves for the record, and I will allow public comment at this time.
You will have 3 minutes to speak. And as a reminder, please state your name for the record. And Bill Sheave, you're up first.
Hi, great. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Hi, I'm Dr. Bill Shiva. I live right next door to the proposed boundary line adjustment. I don't know if it's appropriate or not at these hearings, but I think and feel strongly that it is totally germane to these proceedings. Can you still hear me? My screen changed. There we go. I wish to draw your attention to my email of 16th November 2020 to Sylvia Targ, which has been entered into the record of this hearing. In that email, I elucidate 7 specific instances of the applicant's violation behavior just on the property in question and just since he acquired it. Those instances are but a very small example of a larger and longer history of his building contracting practices and behaviors, including A, multiple lawsuits brought by clients against him, and those practices and behaviors B, including multiple code, permit, and regulations violations and citations against him brought by various county agencies. I can do whatever I want with my property and nobody's going to stop me, is a quote from what the applicant said while threatening an elderly resident of Shashandra Lane with violence when she reported him for prolonged logging and burning without a permit on the property in consideration. Such a display is exemplary of his persistent attitude of blatant disregard for community responsibility, environment, and natural resources. And such an attitude is exemplary of his value system being completely anathema to coastal protection agencies' goals. The facts of his past behaviors are not disparate from the environmental issues at hand and at stake. A man's past behaviors demonstrate the values and attitudes which are in his heart and mind, and those values and attitudes reveal what his intentions are for the future. The intentions of greed, self-interest, and personal profit in this case are directly opposed to the Coastal Protection Agency's intentions of community, environmental welfare, and altruism. I therefore implore you to reject the applicant's request for a boundary line adjustment. Thank you.
Hi, do you hear me? Oh, great. Okay. Hi, my name is Carla Sarvis, and I'm a member of a large neighborhood group, Concerned Neighbors of the Cleon community, and we are strongly opposed to the proposed boundary line adjustment. Approval of this BLA would be a grave omission on the Coastal Commission's charter to protect and oversee careful regulation of environmentally sustainable development. The stated BLA isn't just about moving a little bit of land over here in exchange for a little bit of land over there. The request is an effort by the applicant to not be encumbered by coastal zone policies in order to build as many lots as possible for a major subdivision in a rural community, no matter what type of damage is done to the environment nor the surrounding residential neighborhood. Firstly, the BLA is not a standalone entity. It is part of a larger development, which we find is not compatible with the established physical scale of the area and does not conform to the certified local program. Lot A is not an adequate building site if it is on contaminated soil, if there isn't enough water, if septic is unable to perk properly, if it supports sensitive ecosystems, and if all the neighbors oppose the development. Lot B is not an adequate building site, period. It should be protected from development and not destroyed. Cleone is a designated rural village in the county's land use plan, and its character, rural atmosphere, and visual quality is to be preserved and maintained. 8 new large homes, 8 new septic systems, and 8 new wells will wreak havoc on the neighborhood water table. Last but not least, there is an appalling history of hazardous waste and dumping on the 22 acres from the previous owner and disconcerting agency neglect and dismissal. So this is not your cut and dry BLA. And I strongly urge the Coastal Permit Administrator and the Subdivision Committee to deny this BLA application. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Good morning. This is Colin Morrow. First, I actually had a clarifying question. I understood Planner Kleiser to indicate that some amended memo may have been circulated based upon comments, and I was hoping for some clarification if I heard that correctly. Because I'm looking at the planning website now and I'm not seeing it, so it's difficult for me to. I'm still not seeing it, and I think that potentially creates a Brown Act problem if there's been some short notice change of course. I think at a minimum, this may need to be re-noticed.
If
So
I
that
may,
can
through
be-
the chair, I did refresh it on my end, and I do see the memo available on our website.
You know, I'm still concerned that that's not in conformity with the Brown Act. You know, nevertheless, I'd like to zoom out. And what I'm really concerned about is that this is an effort to go around the coastal development process, which this parcel is currently subject to and should be subject to. This clearly isn't a boundary line adjustment that's occurring in any sort of isolation, but instead it's part of a much larger project. And that project needs to be evaluated as a whole. That's what CEQA tells us. And to piecemeal like this just isn't permissible. This project isn't exempt under 5A or any ministerial exception. And the entire project is going to have substantial impacts on the physical environment, be they to the fen, which is both unique and very nearby, to traffic, to vehicle miles driven. And really, when I look at that vehicle miles driven, I see it, this whole project's really contrary to a lot of the general plan, specifically as it relates to the Fort Bragg community plan. I'm looking at Fort Bragg community policy objectives or goals, CPFB 3, 5, 7, and also 2. And those clearly contemplate infill towards Fort Bragg and not the kind of urban sprawl that Mr. Swithenbank is trying to establish here. I see that I'm running out of time, but I would encourage the planners to look at those 4 general plan objectives. This project is clearly contrary to all 4 of those. Thank you.
Can you hear us? Okay, I zoomed in on this meeting, and I'll be honest, I'm part of the neighborhood who is very concerned about the proposed subdivision that you will be looking at later, and this first step, which is a boundary line adjustment. And I think one of the things that I found disarming is that we are in the coastal zone as well. We're neighbors of the subdivision, proposed subdivision, the land. And we understand the code and what rules we are to follow, what is allowed and what is not allowed. And when somebody has an ulterior motive, as in, yes, I want to divide this land and sell it and eventually have many, many people living in this neighborhood that was really never supposed to have that, or it wouldn't be called a rural village. It seems that this is the first step in not following what the coastal zone, what it's about. And I'm having trouble speaking because I zoomed in on the meeting and I wasn't going to talk, so I'm talking. What else? So I'm very concerned what this will do, of course, to the neighbors, but just the fact that we're taking some land out of a more restrictive. A more what? Restrictive. A more restrictive, so that he can do what he wouldn't be able to do if, as the land is now. And again, I apologize for tripping over my words. I think my greatest concern also is who this person is and his reputation, and the fact that he bought this land and he has not done anything except we saw him logging it and then burning the slash and having big trucks come and take and all done without permits, without CAL FIRE being involved. If that's the way he runs, I don't think that he should be given a green light for anything. And I oppose
Yes, my name is Dr. Stephen Lane, and good morning, and thank you for this opportunity to make some comments on why I oppose the Swithin Bank request for a Coastal Commission boundary line adjustment. So my wife and I live at 32451 Nameless Lane in Cleone, about 350 feet from the eastern edge of the Swithin Bank property. And in the process of buying this property in 2011, we were informed that the previous owner of the now Swithin Bank property, Mr. Dewey Sprague, had been recently cited in order to halt his illegal business of burying junk cars and appliances. So soil tests showed considerable contamination from diesel, gasoline, and motor oil on the property, up to 50 to 75 times the allowed limit. So we were informed that because of the property of our property shared a common aquifer, there was the potential threat of water contamination then and in the future. After hundreds of dollars of sensitive water tests, we detected no contamination and went ahead with our purchase, but we're still consider it a significant ongoing concern. Also, there's no documentation as to the size or duration of Mr. Sprague's illegal and perhaps criminal activity. From the information obtained from eyewitnesses, the number of disposed cars and appliances buried in pits up to 50 feet deep has been described as extensive. Following the citation, Mr. Sprague ignored a request for further testing and took no cleanup or remediation actions. And yet, in answering his subdivision application question as to the presence of hazardous waste on the property, Mr. Swithenbank surprisingly responded no. Subsequent tests paid for by Mr. Swithenbank used only a few samples taken from the same location chosen by Mr. Swithenbank and within 1.5 feet of the surface in the 11-acre parcel. But even so, they still revealed levels of contamination at sort of 16% of the maximum allowed. On the basis of this inadequate test, the property was claimed to be free of significant contamination. So how does all this relate to the boundary adjustment? There are at least three ways. So one is the approval of the boundary line adjustment will open the door to the possibility of constructing a large 11 parcel subdevelopment on top of a buried junkyard. Approval should be withheld until a proper and thorough and unbiased soil and water study has shown it to be safe to proceed. Two, no tests were performed on the portion of the property proposed to be transferred to the Coastal Commission, even though there is evidence of car disposals in that area. So the Coastal Commission is possibly acquiring contaminated land. And finally, undergrounding of services and grading operations could enhance above and below surface water contaminants to flow into other Coastal Commission lands that are downhill.
I have no comments. Thank you.
to the main one up here.
And
I
we
don't
didn't-
know how that happened
All right,
or how to reverse it, but the owl just came back on.
all right.
Okay. If we can just give it a second, there's a lag in the. We could take a 3-minute recess.
Let's,
Would you like?
let's take a 3-minute recess, and I want to make sure that there's proper audio on this for the record. And if there is an issue, then I'm going to ask the speakers to basically come back online and note their concerns.
Okay,
So let's take a 3-minute break.
okay. I don't know.
You guys are good again. It came back on with the owl.
How much
Oh,
time
but
did
that
when
means
did
we
you hear?
lost
Probably.
all the speakers.
No, you got the speakers, but once you went from the speakers back to here, we got none of that.
Okay, so we'll go back to your asking questions.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
All right, thank you.
all right. So let's give it a couple minutes.
So we know that for the future. Learn another lesson that the owl goes off, so does the sound.
That
Yep.
owl.
Okay.
Okay. So, are we muted?
Yes, we're muted. I just
Okay.
don't know how to put that break window up
All right, so.
on that. Let's see.
So let's go back live,
Okay.
and you tell me.
We are unmuted. We are live.
All right, thank you very much. We had technical difficulty for just a couple of minutes, whereas the microphone switched unexpectedly from one microphone to the other. So I am told that where we lost audio.
Just FYI, you're unmuted on, they can hear you through the YouTube stream right now.
Yeah,
We just started.
we just started.
Okay.
So, so what ended up happening is the discussion where it got brought back to the
We got it. Thank you.
coastal
Yes.
permit administrator was not picked up.
Yeah.
So after all the speakers were heard, the item was returned back to the coastal permit administrator. In fact, it was the last speaker we had was Miss Biaggi, and she had no comments. So it was brought back to the coastal permit administrator for me to ask questions of staff, and apparently that portion of it was not picked up. So I'm going to ask those questions again. So the question that I had asked is of staff, has an application for a subdivision been filed?
Yes,
And how many parcels is that application?
11 parcels.
11. It's a major subdivision.
Correct.
All right, so, so we do have an application in, and I think if staff can talk a little bit about the soils report and where it is and what the status of the subdivision application is.
There were a number of items that the applicant needed to turn in to complete the application for the subdivision, the last being the soil report, which was received approximately 3-4 weeks ago. That application has been turned over to Environmental Health Hazmat and to the Water Board, and they are now reviewing it.
All right, so based on those comments from staff, staff cannot proceed with completing their environmental analysis until such time as Environmental Health and the Water Board has responded to staff's inquiries on the soils on the soil study.
That's correct.
All right, thank you. So I've heard a number of issues here today, basically speaking about the previous property owner and the current property owner and what we would refer to as alleged violations. And so, you know, these are things that I have to consider, but a lot of these issues can be addressed. And one of the things that, and reading the staff report and listening to staff in the presentation, is that this is a lot line adjustment. It is not resulting in development of a subdivision. The subdivision will be treated separately as part of a subdivision application. And The subdivision application will go to staff for review. Recommendation will be made to the Planning Commission. Planning Commission will hear the application, and then that application will move further on to the Board of Supervisors for final action. Is that correct, staff?
Yes.
All right. So with that said, we are only looking at a lot line adjustment, and we're not looking at the subdivision through the CPA today. Merely a lot line adjustment to adjust the lines. Okay? And so that's how I'm going to treat it, is as a lot line adjustment. You know, thank everybody for their comments, but I think those comments are warranted at the subdivision level. There have been some concerns that have been raised as far as the soils and so on, and again, these issues would have to be addressed prior to the subdivision being acted upon. What does concern me is if there's any code violations on the property now, that those need to be addressed. And so for lot line adjustments under state law in what's described in the MAP Act and the Government Code, basically refers to the limitations of a local jurisdiction are basically centered around zoning and building requirements. Is that correct, staff?
Yes.
All right, so I'm pretty limited on what I can do as the CPA for a lot line adjustment, because it is zoning and building. But with that, you know, I'm not satisfied with all of the conditions of approval that are placed upon this subdivision. And in order for me to move forward with this boundary line adjustment, excuse me, I would be more comfortable having a condition number 9 added that would state, prior to completion of the boundary line adjustment, B 2017/0043, the owner applicant shall fully address all code violations currently associated with the property, and it shall be demonstrated to the satisfaction of planning and building services prior to the recordation of the new deeds, or the new deeds are recorded. So what completes a boundary line adjustment is we have a tentative map, which was shown on the screen. What completes the lot line adjustment is addressing the conditions of approval, and then allowing the applicant to record the new deeds, which would change the configuration, and that would complete the lot line adjustment, correct?
Yes.
All right, so I do not feel comfortable, you know, completely allowing this to go forward unless there is a satisfaction of dealing with any code violations. In other words, building violations and so on, zoning violations. Again, as I've mentioned, the issues here that I have authority over is building and zoning. The other thing that staff presented was a modification of project findings. And this is a memo dated April 7th, 2021 to the Coastal Permit Administrator from staff that basically has re-examined the staff findings and has added additional language for clarification. And here again, we're looking at, you know, clarifying that this is a lot line adjustment, and then there's no development associated with the proposed lot line adjustment, and it's reiterated throughout the findings. And then staff has also mentioned in their memo that the revised findings are to replace those entered within the staff report for those proposed boundary line adjustment B 2017-0043. Additionally, staff is not recommending any changes to the original conditions of approval. However, I am going to add condition number 9, which I previously read into the record, and I've written it down for staff's view, and that's what I would look at. So,
And if I may, through the chair, real quick.
yes,
During subdivision committee this morning, environmental health did add a condition stating existing septics on lot A shall be brought into compliance to the satisfaction of environmental health.
and that is for the subdivision or for the lot line adjustment?
That's for the lot line adjustment.
All right, so that condition will be number 10.
Mhm.
Okay, and so we'll add that condition. So again, I'm concerned that we need to address any existing code violations that are associated with building and zoning as part of the approval process. Again, I'm listening to the neighbors, I'm listening to the public here, and I think what we need is these additional conditions to ensure that going forward, these issues have been adequately addressed. Now, I do have the applicants still online, and do they wish to make any comments to these conditions of approval?
You're muted. If you're speaking, you need to unmute, please.
All right, thank you. Okay, so we've got the acceptance of these two conditions, which, you know, really will add some, I'll say some enforcement teeth to the lot line adjustment to ensure that these issues are adequately addressed prior to the recordation of the new deeds, finishing the boundary line adjustment. Again, for the record, I am limited on what I can do here. Any issues associated with the subdivision will need to be heard at the Planning Commission and at the Board of Supervisors for a major subdivision. And again, as I understand it, the property has a zoning and land use designation of RR5 brackets RR1. And if staff could remind me, as far as the density, we have RR5 is the land use and zoning, but based on adequate proof and water, septic and water, they can go down to RR1, correct?
Correct.
All right. So again, that's something that still needs to be viewed through the analysis. And so there still could be a change, but again, the application has been submitted. It's going through the review process for the subdivision as 11 parcels. But again, it's going to be based on studies, based on data that's coming in. And again, that will be presented to the Planning Commission at a future date for recommendation. And then I would note that the subdivision itself receives a recommendation from the Planning Commission that goes on to the Board of Supervisors for final action. So, noting that, I'm going to go ahead and approve boundary line adjustment B217-0043, subject to the modifications per the April 7, 2021 staff memo regarding findings, and we're going to add 2 additional conditions, which is condition number 9, which states prior to completion of the boundary line adjustment, B 2017-0043, the owner applicant shall fully address all code violations currently associated with the property, and that shall be demonstrated to the satisfaction of planning and building services prior to the new deeds are recorded. And then number 10 is...
Number 10 is existing septics on Lot A shall be brought into compliance to the satisfaction of environmental health.
All right, so with that said, your project is approved, subject to those modification and findings and the 2 new conditions, 9 and 10. All right, thank you. So with that, I'm going to move to item number 4, which is matters from staff.
No matters?
We have no matters from
All
staff.
right. Any matters from the public? The Coastal Permit Administrator welcomes participation in meetings. This item is limited to matters under the jurisdiction of the CPA, which are not on the posted agenda, and items which have not already been considered by the Coastal Permit Administrator.
We have not had a request for public comment.
All right. So that moves me to item number 6, which is adjournment. So with that said, the meeting is adjourned at 11:47 a.m. Thank you, staff, and thank you to members of the public. Can I see the wording on the, we are muted, right?
We are muted.
Can I see the wording on from